Hello and welcome to Walking the Earth podcast, a podcast about the backpacking experience. You can find us online at WTEpodcast.com. I'm Justin Castle calling in from New York City, New York.
And I'm Mike Margulies calling in today from Cat Ba Island, Vietnam. And our guest today is Nancy Sathry Vogel. Nancy, I didn't butcher that too much, did I?
Not at all.
And Nancy, you're calling in from Boise, Idaho, your hometown. You are, I guess, an inspirational speaker and author. You're the force behind FamilyOnBikes.org. And I guess we wanted to bring you on the show because I think what you're doing is pretty amazing. There's plenty of backpackers like me who go solo, all that stuff. And some people will give that reaction of, well, it's easy. You don't have a family responsibilities. But I think you go to show that, well, actually, that shouldn't stop you because you have been bicycling around with a husband and two kids for years now, traveling with the family, making it work.
Absolutely. Make it work. That's it. You just make your decision on what you're going to do, and then you go and you figure out how to make it work.
Gotcha. Awesome.
That's I think that's amazing because I definitely that's a reaction that people do give is and we talked about this a little bit before. It's sort of it's almost like an excuse in some ways, right? When people say, "Oh, well, I have this reason I can't go," and that reason. But I think you're living proof that actually there are ways.
Well, I think it's really important that you look at your reason and try to differentiate between, is this a real reason why you can't do this, or is this just an excuse? Is it a convenient excuse? So whatever your dream is, if you want to do it and you have very valid reasons, it could be health reasons, it could be that you're taking care of aging parents. There are many reasons that will hold people back. But there are also many excuses, and sometimes it's hard to know the difference.
Right. I gotcha. And I know just, Mike and we're in our late 20s, approaching 30, and Mike's he's gone in this adventure. He's out there. He's been there, done that. He's living the word, so to speak. Now, when you got started, you were around, well, I guess you were younger than I when you got started traveling, but when you got started biking, I believe you were 29. Is that correct?
I was 29 when we flew to Pakistan.
Yep.
So yes, my now husband. At the time, I didn't know him, but at the time, I flew to Pakistan, and with this man, I spent the next year cycling around Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, and
Awesome.
then we got married when we got back to the U.S. a year later.
Wow, that's awesome. That's definitely cool. That's a love story right there. Born from nothing.
Interesting story for sure.
Yeah, I know I've mentioned in the past 2 or 3 podcasts, but have you seen Janiper, the cycling story about Tom?
I have heard of it.
You
I've
have
heard of it, but I've never read it.
Okay, excellent. You can definitely get it online. I know it's on iTunes, and I think you can get it on Amazon as well. Janiper. Basically, this man goes traveling around the world. He's out of England, and he falls in love with a girl that he meets on the road, and then they start cycling, and they go through the ups and the downs of cycling, and eventually they got married, and now they live together and have a blog and a pretty highly trafficked website. So that's it's similar to your story, kind of, but just a little bit more recent. That's all. They started more recently.
Right. Yep. So we spent that year, that was back in 1990-91.
Right.
And then we did 16 years where we did the traditional thing. My husband and I are both teachers, and so we were teaching school. Now, granted, we were teaching in other countries. We were teaching in international schools, so we didn't live in the U.S. We were living abroad, but for all practical purposes, our life was pretty similar to other teachers for 16 years. And then amazingly, we made the decision to leave teaching, and we headed out again on the bikes. This time we had twin sons that were 8, and so we spent the boys' 3rd grade year cycling around the U.S. and Mexico.
Yeah.
While we were on that trip, we made the decision that we wanted to ride from Alaska to Argentina. And so then when the boys just finished 4th grade, we took off, and they spent their grades 5, 6, and 7 years cycling from Alaska to Argentina.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's incredible. I guess I'd be really interested to hear more about that aspect of that we haven't really touched on in this show. Is what are the additional complications that come with having a family and children while you're traveling, and how do you kind of make it work? You know?
Well, I think the main thing is our society tells us that parents need to kind of toe the line. Parents need to be responsible. They need to do X, Y, and Z. We have these very tightly defined parameters for what parents can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes difficult when you have other dreams, when you have other aspirations, when you have other things you want to do. Most families don't take their kids out on bicycles for 4 years. That's not what most families do.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there were some people there were a lot of people who felt what we were doing was absolutely fabulous and amazing, and they recognized it for what it was, an amazing experience for all 4 of us. But there were some who were very critical of it.
Right.
And what that did was it really made me truly reevaluate, is this a good thing for my kids or not? And I think as parents, that's your number one concern is,
yes,
am I doing right by my kids?
Yeah.
Is this the best thing for my child?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard when you're trying to do something outside the box because you don't have a role model to lean on. You don't have somebody to say, oh yeah, this person did, and look, their kids turn out okay.
Right.
And so we just kind of had to go, follow our heart, and say, this is what we're going to do. We trust that this is going to be good, and go. But it's that doubt, that self-doubt of parenting, am I doing the best thing for my children, that's kind of the biggest complication, I think, that having kids throws into the whole mix.
Right.
Wow, I can only imagine, because even like as a solo traveler, I have that self-doubt. I had it, and I've sort of silenced it now, but it comes back. It's like, wait, what am I doing? Because I had, just like you, right? It was when I left, some people were like, oh, that's amazing, and some people were also like, well, you're crazy. What are you doing? And that's just me solo. I can only imagine that if you also have the responsibility of a family and kids,
right,
that pressure and that questioning is intensified, right? Because it's not just your own self that you're responsible for, and whose life you're affecting, but it's many other people. So I can imagine that it must be an intense kind of, I guess, internal thing. I mean, does it help that you've got your husband is there with you as well? So at least maybe does that help that the two of you guys can, can sort of confirm to each other, no, we're doing the right thing.
Absolutely. I mean, knowing that there were 2 of us coming in, both of us feeling that this was a good thing definitely helps, for sure.
Right.
But it's still, it's unsettling. I mean, am I ruining my child? Am I destroying my child's life? Am I ruining his chances, and he's not going to be able to make anything out of his life because I made the wrong decision here?
Right.
Those are all factors that you think about.
Right.
I wanted to go ahead, Gassel.
I wanted to ask, so, you have all these different things that you're juggling in the air when you're taking your kids with you. And like you said, it's am I negatively or positively affecting my kids? Are they going to be better or worse off? I think that, how this comes to be a measurement of what they could or should be or potentially are being affected by this trip. Are you able to judge that? Are you just basically, I'm losing track of my thought, but basically I want to know, are you bringing them back into the schooling system, and do they seem to be, have they told you, like, I feel good, I feel like I know a lot more than my other peers do? Like, is that something you talk about?
I think it's really important to recognize that we will never know how our journey affected them.
Right.
I often say there is no control group. There is no Davy and Daryl who didn't do the journey versus Davy and Daryl who did. Okay?
Right.
So we will never know what they would have been without the travels.
Right.
So that makes it hard, because one of the big questions people have is, how did this affect them, or how did they do? And I don't know how it affected them, and I never will know. What I can say is that they have integrated back into society fine. There were some small bumps in the road when we first got back, and I mean small things, like the first day of class, we put them in class just half time just to see how they would do, if this was going to work or not.
Right.
Maybe we would continue homeschooling, maybe not, we just didn't know.
Right.
And so we put them into school, and the first day they came home and they said, "Mom, I need a binder. My teacher said I need a binder. What's that?" and I had to laugh about it. It's a binder. Like, how hard is this?
That's
But
funny.
my kids had been out of America for so long, when other kids were starting middle school and they had to have binders, and so everybody else knew what a binder was, but my kids had no idea.
Right.
And it was
Yeah.
little things like that. I would say for a good 6 or 8 months, we would come up across little things that they just didn't know because they hadn't been here.
Right.
Right.
And so fortunately they took it all in stride. I think they had just been traveling for so long, and they were so used to not knowing stuff that everybody else knew that it didn't bother them.
Right.
But once they kind of settled in and all that, I mean, as far as academically, they're fine. We are still officially homeschooling, but they are taking advanced classes.
At the local schools.
And so they're taking some advanced math and science classes, and they're doing just fine with it.
Awesome.
And so I think academically they did fine, and socially they're fine.
Great.
I think overall, our journey really benefited them. But again, I mean, maybe they would have been doing this anyway, even without the journey. I don't know. I can say that our journey did not hurt them.
I gotcha.
Right.
Go
Yeah.
ahead,
I'd have to agree. I mean, I think, and this is a good. This relates to actually your most recent book, which is Road Schooling, and I'd actually love to hear you talk more on that topic, because I think the question maybe listeners have now is, wait, so how were you going about this whole homeschooling thing while you're traveling on bikes around the world? And I'll let you kind of speak to it, because I think your approach on it is pretty amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So I did. I just released a book a couple of months ago called Road Schooling: The Ultimate Guide to Education Through Travel. And it goes into the theoretical stuff about what happens inside our brain when we learn. Because I think it's really important, if a parent is considering a major lifestyle thing like we did, it's important that you understand that process of learning, understand what is happening inside the brain when you actually learn. So I talk about that, but then I go into a much more concrete, hands-on ideas of how to take advantage of your travels. And by that I mean, when you're in Egypt, you're learning about Egypt. You're taking advantage of where you are to learn.
Right.
One of the things that we did when we were arriving at the Panama Canal, we spent some time researching prior to getting to the canal, and we researched the history of the canal, the logistical challenges of making the canal. We looked at the economic impact of cutting that 10 days off of the journey.
Right.
We looked at the ecological challenges of combining the two oceans, the physics involved with raising and lowering the ships. So there were so many different aspects to the Panama Canal that we could study.
And you saw it firsthand.
And then, yeah, right. And then when we arrived there, we were able to go to the canal. We were able to talk with the people in the little museum there. And so we could take our learning a step further beyond what we learned on the internet, by being there and seeing it and doing it. And so by road schooling, that's what I mean, is where are you in the world? I mean, what are you seeing? What's around you? And how can you take advantage of that to teach reading, writing, science, social studies? So you can teach all of those subjects within the greater context of your travels.
Yes.
And that's what the book is all about.
Now,
I love that. It's great because that's a question I think people would have, is if I'm traveling, people who want to have a family and want to travel, that would say, oh, how am I going to educate my children if I'm traveling? And I think what you hone in on in your book is that actually traveling isn't really necessarily a thing that detracts from education, but in fact it can be something you can use that to the advantage of the education and use the places you are to enhance the process. And I also I really like the example you gave us before we started recording, and when you were saying, hey, if you're in Egypt at the pyramids, why are you looking at a textbook about the American Civil War? You study the pyramids. You're right here.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so many parents really feel, because education is huge.
Yes.
We all know how important the education of our children is. And so many parents are really afraid to kind of just take off on their own, and they feel much more comfortable having a set curriculum. Okay, today we're going to do pages 55 and 56. And we don't care that we happen to be in Ha Long Bay, Vietnam. We are going to learn about whatever is on pages 55 and 56.
and I want to say something to that. I think that's Mike and I have talked about this before, and I think that in our education, in our careers, learning from the time you're in kindergarten through high school, you have a curriculum, you're learning based on the curriculum, and you're developing tendencies and patterns to satisfy that curriculum to get an A. Okay.
Right.
And I think that there's negative things when it comes to that, because you're taught to try to achieve perfection. But what is defined as perfection? When you're a kid trying to get an A, who's trying to also, learn how to socialize and learn how to be a little kid in a society. Like there's so many things you're learning, and I feel like, we're taught to learn certain skills to satisfy get the positive result, and I think it's negative.
A lot of the time,
you study to the test, you study to the curriculum, you get these patterns ingrained in you that are detrimental to you later in life. Some of them are positive, but I think you're studying to get the test, and that's it. You're not taught to think creatively. Like, you think Montessori schools where they follow the student and let the student learn by themselves. I'm not an expert on Montessori, but I get the philosophy. And I think that, are these similar philosophies that are based in your book of, having this kids explore? Is that those are kinds of things that you're thinking of?
Well, I think it's really important that we draw a distinction between learning and grades.
Right.
Yeah.
So I personally, as a teacher, I had 21 years teaching experience.
Yeah.
But I do not agree with our grading system. I don't agree with the way that so many parents, if you bring home an A, I'll give you money, or if you bring home an A, I'll give you this.
Right.
I think the focus needs to be on learning. Exactly. The focus needs to be on learning.
Right.
And so I don't care what grade my kids get. I want them to learn.
Right.
And so the focus needs to be on learning. And that's in my book. It's all about what can you learn and how can you learn. And I think there are some good things about our schools. I am not anti-school at all.
Neither am I.
Right.
But I realize that there are some limitations and there are some shortcomings, and that is one of them.
Yes.
That's definitely one of them. And unfortunately, our entire society has bought into this idea of if you get A's, it means you're learning more, and it may not be. That may not be true.
No, it may not be, and it's a system that's it's designed this way. You also kind of you lump people together and expect every single person to also have the same proficiencies, right? But maybe some people are more artistic or creative, and a lot of people that we diagnose them say, oh, you've got ADD, and we'll give you some Ritalin so you can be like everyone else and be still in class and get good grades. And but maybe this is a person that should be trying some more creative, artistic things. I think that's definitely a limitation of our system, is that we try to put everyone in the same box and say this is how you're scored on the same way, A, B, C, D, and every subject. And it's focused on letters versus actually learning. I think a lot of the time.
Right.
I'm curious now, with the system that we have in education. So you're in a structure from, a young age through 18. Then if most people choose to go to college, and then from there, if you follow the pattern, you start working, and then you start, establishing a family. And we constantly talk to people on this podcast, and people such as yourself, such as Michael, who break that pattern and start doing these other things. And I think that, why does the educational system have to be, a part of the pattern? Why can't we do the education on the road? Why can't we do these things? I think it's something that we need more of in the world. And I wanted to ask you, do you know Montessori schools? Have you read up on them? Are you familiar with their techniques or anything, Nancy?
I'm somewhat familiar. Yeah, I have a basic idea of what they are. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on them and what they're talking about? Are their mantras?
I think it's fine. I think that's good, and I think that's probably the schools kind of should go more with that.
Actually, for my benefit and the audience members, could one of you guys just give a brief overview of what a Montessori school is? Because I personally have no idea.
I don't, Nancy, you want me to try to give my crack at it? It's gonna be all right. It's gonna be decent. Some people, if you can test, feel free to email me. Basically, I've met several people who've worked in Montessori schools, and what their mantra is to follow the development of the child. So they don't have, quote unquote, a set curriculum or a teacher. They follow the child's development, and they try to teach. I'm only going to skim on this. I'm going to mess it up, but they try to have a bunch of different people in the room following the kids' activities and following, their development, and guiding them, but not teaching them facts, so to speak. Teaching them more methods of how to learn and how to get information, so they learn it the first time, as opposed to here, learn this fact. Do this. It's okay. This child's learning at this level. I'm going to point them towards this, so they learn this skill set and go from there. And again, I might have butchered that, but that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, and I think that's fairly close. It tends to be more common at the younger ages. Right. They have a lot of just different centers set up, so kids would be able to go and do whatever they want. So they may have 15 different learning stations set up around the room, and then kids can, if they are fascinated by math, they can spend all day at math. Usually they'll kind of recommend that kids take some time at the other stations as well, but They don't force it. And so kids can really kind of delve into wherever they are interested in. Mm-hmm. It's great. It's usually only at the earlier ages. Right. It's much harder to find more Montessori schools that actually carry that through, all the way through till the college age. Yeah. But the idea is great of allowing kids to, expose them to lots of different things.
Right.
And then let them go where they want to go.
I like the idea. I mean, especially in today's era where we've got Google and information's at our fingertips. I think it's less critical today to memorize, say, facts, because you can find the information out there that you need to find. So memorizing facts isn't important. But it sounds like this kind of school, so I only know as much as you guys just told me, but it's more about teaching people how to learn. And that's really what's important, because you can always find the information, but you need to know how to go through the process of finding them and of combing through all the massive amount of information that's there today. So I think there's something to say for that, for sure.
And I think the only reason I mention is because it sounds like it's similar to Nancy, what you're saying with your technique that you discuss in road schooling, and how the brain changes and develops and actually learns, and it sounded similar, so I wanted to get it out there for people to hear.
Right. One of the things that is the most important to remember when you're educating a kid is that kids' brains are designed to learn. It's what they do. They learn, and that's no matter where they are, no matter what they're doing, they learn, and you can't really hold that back. And so if once you accept that, you accept this basic premise that kids learn, then that kind of frees things up. And so then you have to look at, okay, so they're going to learn anyway. Mm-hmm. As long as you put them in a challenging and stimulating environment, they're going to learn. Yeah. And does it really matter if they learn the parts of the flower and the phases of the moon in grade 3? Or could they be learning about ancient Egypt and the pyramids, or the American Civil War, or about the Falklands War, or whatever? Is there anything magic about, the schools have a certain curriculum, and we typically teach certain things at different years, but why? Is there any big reason why those particular topics have to be taught this year? And I talk with some parents who are like, my kid won't keep up. I can't just take advantage of my travels because we won't be studying the same thing that their peers will be studying. And I'm saying that's true. That's true. You won't.
And that's
but
the advantage.
Is that
maybe.
a bad thing? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it's not that there's anything wrong with learning the parts of a flower or the phases of the moon or any of those things that are taught in school. There's nothing wrong with those things.
Right.
It's just that there's nothing magical about those things either.
They're arbitrary.
Exactly. Very arbitrary.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point that I never quite thought about in those terms. But now that you mention it, there's infinite amount of information in this world now that can be learned. Yeah, so it is very, very arbitrary, like what we decide are the things you learn at a certain age. And I think when you nailed it there, it's like, kids are going to learn. So wherever you are, take advantage of where you are, what's going on, and you will learn something and grow, and it will be and even if it's different than your peers, I would say that's probably an advantage if you have a alternative perspective than what everyone else already knows. If everyone already knows it, then that's information that, it's already known by the larger society. So I would say it's even more valuable to be aware of things that most people are not aware of.
Right.
Gives you that. I think it gives you an advantage, at least.
That's very.
I like to believe it does.
Yeah, it's inspiring to me. As who knows what the future holds for me? Like, will I have a family and kids and all this good stuff? I mean, at some point, I'd like to think I'll fall in love, all that stuff. And it's nice to be talking to someone like you who even it doesn't have to mean if I go and I have a family that I have to stop following my passion as I'm traveling or whatever that my passion happens to be at that point in the future. You can do it, and there are ways you can use your passion, follow your passion, use that to your advantage to help your kids.
Right.
And I think that's inspiring.
Absolutely, you can totally use it. Yes.
I think. Go ahead.
No, man, tell you.
And and also, I think that you're, by your kids learning on the road and being with you and your husband John, is that correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Just being exposed to traveling, making itineraries, having to learn and being able to adapt and change on the fly has given, your two kids a skill set that not many other children have that are currently in the school system, and they'll have that for the rest of their life. They've learned different things. They have different skill sets than anyone else, and I'm sure that that's going to work to their advantage in the future. I mean, just thinking out of theory alone.
It's funny that you just said that, because I was reading through a forum online one time it was these people that were very critical of us, and they really thought what we were doing was horrible. And
if you don't have critics, you're doing something wrong. If you don't have critics.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so I'm reading through this forum, and this particular quote really stood out. We were talking about what the kids are learning, and somebody said they're learning to be bums on bikes. Oh. And I kind of, and this was kind of in my period of self-doubt of, as a parent, am I doing the right thing for my kids? Is this the good thing? Ultimately, am I hurting or helping my kids? And, the whole 9 yards, right?
Right.
And so, so I was really doubting, and so that quote has always kind of stayed with me. And so now I laugh, because now I've got these two kids who are very advanced math and science, taking AP courses. Daryl took AP calculus in grade 9.
Right.
I didn't take calculus until I was a junior in college. So he was in grade 9, took AP calculus, and And it
Amazing.
kind of just cracks me up that here these people really felt that all we were setting our kids up for, the only thing we were teaching them was how to be bums on bikes.
Yeah.
And I had to laugh at that one.
Oh.
That's funny. That is a reaction people give you, though, is like they think if you're just traveling, and actually, this show, Walking the Earth podcast, is named after a scene in Pulp Fiction where Samuel L. Jackson said, John Travolta asked him, "What are you going to do? You're really thinking about quitting?" And Samuel Jackson goes, "Yeah, basically, I'm just going to walk the earth." And John Travolta's response is, "No, Jules, you decided to be a bum. That's what you decided to be." And
Brilliant. Yes.
yeah, so we drew the inspiration from that scene for the name of the show, because that's sort of like how I felt. I was like Samuel L. Jackson saying, "Yeah, I'm going to quit. I'm just going to walk the earth, go from place to place, meet people, get adventures." And then John Travolta are the naysayers that were saying, "No, Mike, you decided to be a bum." And I'm like, "Nope,
Yes.
I'm just going to be Mike. I'm just going to be Jules. No more, no less."
Yeah, exactly. And it's all good. It's all good. There are so many different paths we can take, so many different ways we can go, and I think that having that outside the box experience will only make you a richer person.
Yes.
I really
Yeah.
believe that if we could get kids out traveling, our world would be a different place.
Yes.
There's a good
We
quote
would
that-
not have the wars we have. You can't go and travel amongst these regions and get to know kids from these other countries and then support war with them.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. It's so funny. As I was talking yesterday, I was sitting down with two Germans and a Spanish couple, and I was thinking to myself, it's so funny because in my grandparents' time, we were in a war with the Germans. About 100 some years ago, we had the Spanish-American War. I was like, not that distant history, these would have been my enemies, and it's just so crazy to think about. Like, wait, what? Obviously, I'm here in Vietnam. I'm
Right.
in Vietnam, where America,
Yeah.
and it's like,
a
wait,
biggie.
what do you mean? We were here fighting a war against these people in very recent history, and it is mind blowing when you're out here. You realize, like, wait, why are we fighting? Why are we drawing lines, us and them? No, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yep, indeed, and that's the message that we need to get out. I mean, and I think that starts with our children. I think if we can get our kids out so that kids can see the humanity, they won't buy into the hype, the hysteria that is being sold to them, especially here in the U.S., of these evil. I mean, I can't believe how often I hear people talk about, America needs this huge military to defend us
Right.
against our enemies, and I'm saying,
We to defend our freedom.
No.
there's a dog.
The
Something's
dogs
going
are
on
barking
outside.
for freedom.
Hey, dogs.
Yeah, really barking for freedom.
What are
There we go.
what are the dogs' names? We got to introduce them now because they're
Yeah.
on the podcast.
The dogs are, we have Mo, who's a little Chihuahua Schnauzer mix. We have Kiara, who is adorable, and she is a golden retriever in Dotson. So she looks like a golden retriever in a Dotson body. And then there's Sadie, who's a black lab.
Awesome.
You got a whole family over there of
We
dogs,
do.
huh?
We got a tribe.
Do the dogs have bikes of their own?
No, they actually, until we got Sadie, we had they traveled in the trailer. We have the Bob trailers that we pull behind our bikes.
Oh, cool.
And so Kiara and Mo always traveled all over town, only town. They haven't gone touring, but they were all over town in the Bob trailer. But now that we got the black lab, they don't fit in the trailer anymore. So
I gotcha. That's still awesome. I've never had dogs. My parents said you have siblings. You don't need You don't need pets.
oh,
I had a
dogs
hamster.
are wonderful.
I'm one of 4 kids, and they said, "Yeah, you got little siblings you can play with." They got me a hamster, but then the hamster obviously bit me, and I didn't like it that much. So I'm
Now,
jealous.
So Nancy, I guess another thing that you want to talk about a little bit, we wanted to hear you talk about was you have a consulting kind of thing you're starting up. So people who have questions like, how can I guess it's probably aimed towards families, I'm assuming, that want to travel and know, how can I do it? You have the answer, I suppose, yeah?
Right. Well, I've got a small business going right now. It's at dreamreboot.com, and it's a program, an ongoing support program for people who are wanting to make some big change in their life, like they're wanting to head out and go travel. So a friend and I run this, and we've been doing that for a few years now, and that's great. I keep getting questions over and over about the education, and being a longtime teacher, I have a master's in education. So I get a lot of questions about the educational side of things, and so I am now. We just got home a few days ago after the summer, but I'm now working on getting things organized, and I will be just doing some one-on-one consulting with families who are wanting to go and travel, but are concerned about the education. How do
Right.
we go about doing this? And again, I mean, I really think it's something that if somebody holds their hand for the first destination or two of where they're going and kind of walks them through some of the different activities that they can be doing, give them an idea of how to do it, they can just be on their own and take off running. And so that's what I'll be starting up, is just some consulting to help people over that initial fear,
Right.
help them understand that their kids are going to learn and they're going to be fine and they're not going to ruin their kids for the rest of their life, and
Right.
and,
You're
and
not
it's all
teaching them to be
good.
bums on bikes.
Exactly.
Hey, you know what? If somebody says that everyone's bums, but it can be like, hey, look at their math grades.
Well, and it's funny. It's really funny you say that, because I have actually heard from quite a few people who have done exactly that.
Posted the postcard. Posted the
Yeah,
grade
they're all
cards.
concerned about taking their kids out, and they're saying, "But look, these kids traveled around the world on bicycles for 4 years, and yet look at them, they're taking AP classes." and
Right.
and so it's kind of become this joke within
Yeah.
our circle of this. Yeah, we've destroyed our kids' lives. And
You know what? I can understand their fears. I'm trying to put my feet in their shoes. It's like, wow, being a parent is a huge responsibility. Working is a huge responsibility. Paying the bills is a huge responsibility. If you've never been a teacher before, I know you've had experiences that, like, I could see they want the best for the kids just like anybody else does, and I understand they want to give their kids the best, and maybe those are shoes that they're just not familiar with being filled, and that's why, I think that this road schooling book that you're mentioning that you've written is probably exactly what they need to hear to put have them go over the edge and make that first step probably.
yes. Oh, and I don't blame parents for being concerned about it at all. I know that education is huge. We all know how important education is, and we parents, I mean, I being a teacher, of course, I have a different perspective, but as parents, we do have this idea that the schools have this scientifically designed curriculum that is designed to make sure that our kids know everything they need to know, and blah blah blah, and that's kind of, we've kind of developed that attitude as a society,
Right.
and there and so I totally understand why parents are scared. They don't want to ruin their parents. Ruin their kids. They want to do the best thing, and that's fine. And that's all I want to do is just try to help these parents and help them over those hurdles and help them understand that you can
Right.
take advantage of your travels and it will be wonderful and your kids will learn what they need to learn.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
definitely.
Is-
That's great. So I guess the site's forthcoming for that consulting kind of thing. It'll be somewhere on familyonbikes.org. Will be links to that kind of thing.
It will be on familyonbikes.org. I also have a site at roadschooling.com. Unfortunately, we've been gone all summer, and so that doesn't even have my book on it yet. But anyway, that will have both the book and the consulting in it. But everything will be on Family on Bikes as well. And so that's probably the best place to go because that tends to be where things get centered.
Ah, great. Okay, sweet. Well, actually, we want to ask you one more question.
Okay.
And that question is, what is one more thing that you haven't already done in your life that you would like to do before it's all over?
I taught on the Navajo Indian Reservation way back in the 80s. And my teaching assistant was a silversmith, a Navajo silversmith, and she made beautiful stuff. And I wanted to get into silversmithing back then in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I also knew that I wanted to travel. And I knew that silversmithing and travel were not a match made in heaven. There was so much equipment involved with silversmithing, and so I didn't do that. I ended up doing beadwork, and I've been in beadwork. I've been doing that for years, and I have recently made the decision to start silversmithing. And so this started, I think, in February. I started taking a silversmithing class, and I've been playing with metals, and so I'm still very much a beginner, but I am hoping that I can develop my silversmithing skills. So that's my goal. It's not travel so much anymore. I traveled for many years, and I'm kind of over the travel. If I never travel again in my life, I'm okay with that at this point.
Okay.
Next phase.
But the next phase, exactly. So I've been really getting into the metalsmithing. I've been playing with copper. Once I kind of perfect my copper with my skills with the copper, I hope to start working more with sterling, and that's been a lot of fun. It's been something that has been totally challenging me in a whole different way.
Awesome.
Oh, fantastic.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's a key thing is, I'm coming to understand it myself is, okay, so there was a point in time where travel was the number one thing, and I did, and now I'm at a phase where I've talked about in recent episodes as well, maybe I want a little bit more stability, and I think, like, the key maybe is not that you have to choose one thing with your life and that's what you do forever. I'm always traveling or whatever. It's no, you follow at the moment what's your passion, right. And it eventually for me also, I'm going to say, oh, well, I don't think I'm completely done with traveling, but at some point I'll think, oh, maybe I will be, and I'll say I'm ready to maybe take up some silver crafting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny how when we talk about this whole idea of dreams, we tend to have one dream. I mean, so like I liken it a lot to our riding our bikes from Alaska to Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a big dream, and
wow.
So for the year while we were planning, I was so focused on getting to Alaska. Like it was, if I can just get to Alaska, like this is this big leap. I have all this other stuff I have to do. I have to get to Alaska. And so finally we did. Well, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the dream has, I guess, shifted. It's still kind of tied in with the same dream, but I used to be so focused on getting to Alaska. Now I'm in Alaska, so now what's next? Okay, so then I shift my focus to getting to Argentina. Okay, so now the dream is to get to Argentina.
Right.
And so with each phase of this process, the goal is different.
Yes.
But I think it's important that you set a goal and you kind of have something out there.
Right.
Yes.
And if you don't, it can be really hard. I had a friend who spent many years cycling around the world. He was on the road for 9 years or something like that. And about probably a year and a half before he finally actually stopped, he made a comment on Facebook and he said, I really want to stop traveling, but I don't know how.
Interesting.
And it really hit me. Really hit me that it's something that it's the same thing. Traveling to him had become his 9 to 5.
Right.
And it was just as hard for him to get out of the traveling as it is for most people to get into it.
Yeah.
Because any of these big changes, they're scary and they're hard and you don't know how to do it and you're comfortable in your routine and you know that routine. And so it's hard to change.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really important that you set an end goal. You say, this is what I hope to achieve, and it doesn't have to be like for us it was a physical destination where we want to get to the southern tip of South America, but it could be something else where I want to learn this, and once I've learned this, then I give myself permission to move on to the next phase.
Gotcha.
Yes.
But I just think that it's got to evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This actually ties in very much with things we talked about in the last episode. A fellow who is also a cycler, cycling around the world, and he talks about, we had a big conversation about breaking habits, and something Justin actually made a pretty astute observation where he said, well, hey, aren't you guys in the habit of moving? And that's true. I'm now in this habit of moving, and the thing is, when I went on this indefinite backpacking trip, I think something to understand is no, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be backpacking forever. There will be, like you said, there's phases. So now it's time for the next phase. And having a goal is a good thing. And that's what I'm kind of now defining for myself, or what are my next goals for the next phase of my life. And and then maybe they change too. I'm trying to be flexible with them, but I think it's all these things are important. Yeah.
Yes. They totally change. As you go through life, they totally change. And that's okay. That's fine. But again, getting back to way at the beginning of this conversation, the idea of having a reason versus having an excuse.
Right.
Yes.
Sometimes you have very valid reasons why you can't do something. Too often, we actually have excuses and we use those as reasons. And so it's very important that we keep that clear and we are honest with ourselves. Is this an excuse or is this a reason?
Gotcha.
Definitely.
And I think that's amazing. And in a future episode, I think you'll be interested in this. We're looking to possibly get a life coach or someone who helps people with these types of decisions, decision-making processes on the show, and talk to them about things they recognize and ways to set goals and things like that. And I think that speaks exactly to what you're saying right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's fantastic. Yep. So folks that are interested in finding you, Nancy, the best place, it sounds, is familyonbikes.org. Your most recent book is Road Schooling. And so we will actually, we make a sort of blog post with each episode. So we'll have posting with this episode that will have links to all your pages. So familyonbikes.org. I think you're on Twitter. Are you at Family on Bikes? Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, at Family on Bikes. We'll have links to all that. And also we'll have links to your book. Actually, our show, Walking the Earth podcast, has an affiliate link with Amazon. And so we're going to put a link through through that. Basically, if you buy Nancy's book through the link on our page, you'll support Nancy, support the show, support all around. So we'll throw all the links to people who are interested to all of your various books on the posting for this episode, and also all the ways that people can find you online. But yeah, I think I hit all the important stuff there. Check us. You can find that all, of course, at WTEpodcast.com.
Yes, thanks,
Mr.
Nancy.
Castle.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy, for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
And
thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. This is Justin Castle in New York City for Walking the Earth podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.